Good morning, Alex, and we welcome to our training session for the seminar on sustainability in action. I have to honor you, Alex Paya. So can you introduce yourself?
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm very excited to be here in Thailand and to share my knowledge that I've accumulated over the last 2 years, really focused on sustainability. I have been with WestRock for about 27 years, so I understand our business fairly well. But the area of sustainability is a constantly evolving and changing space. So you always need these sessions to learn about sustainability. And I encourage you all to ask questions and really get a good understanding and clarification if something's not clear. This session is being translated into Thai and I believe Vietnamese. So if at any stage I'm going too fast, you'll just need to let me know.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're going to cover today, we've got 2 hours of conversation, which is very exciting, is, what exactly is sustainability? It's a little bit wishy-washy. And so we need to get clear about what we think about when we look at sustainability. We'll also look at why concern ourselves with sustainability. What's the impact? We look at greenwashing. This is an important thing when you think about what's happening in the news. There are companies that are being penalised for having misleading information. We look at how to measure sustainability and how to achieve net zero. Net zero? What's that? How do you get there? Then we'll look at WestRock's LCA tool, which is a tool that measures emissions and other environmental factors. We'll look at certified packaging and why that's important, and then some innovation to really support the circular economy. And these are concepts that we'll review and talk about as we go through the presentation. So at any stage, just ask a question. Don't wait till the end. It's better to get the clarification right at the point. So what is sustainability? The United Nations Brundtland Commission defined sustainability in 1987 as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now, meet, think of that word, meet. It means don't use excess amount. When you're using resources, just use enough to produce what you need to produce. We need to make sure that those resources are available for future people, our children, our grandchildren. And so when we look at the resources we're using, we really need to think about the renewable resources versus non-renewable. Another thing, more recently, in September 22, Angela Hasted did a TED talk about sustainability because even with this definition, it was still very confusing. And she talked about absolute sustainability. And the concept here is really about, focusing not just on one element of sustainability, for example, CO2 emissions and climate change. Try and think of sustainability as the full picture, looking at pollution, the environment, CO2 emissions, climate, water, what's happening in the water. So it's a real full picture that we look at when we're taking actions under this sustainability mindset. So there are a number of models out there, and you can see 3 different ones, but they all have the same meaning. So we have the 3 Ps down the bottom: people, planet, and profit. We have the pillars, the 3 pillars of sustainability: social, which is people, environment, which is the planet, and then economic, which is profit. And then we also have our bubbles, which are interlinked section where we look at how these areas of social, economic, and environment coincide and how we can focus and change or take actions to look after these areas. So these models really create a holistic approach when we consider the people, the planet, and the profits to evaluate sustainability. And, countries can use these models. Thailand as a whole can use this model and say, okay, when I'm thinking about the environment, what environmental legislation and policies will I create? When I'm thinking about the social and the people, what sort of things can I do in terms of helping my people to achieve a certain standard of living? And when I'm thinking about the economy, what can I, as the government, do to help the economy to grow? All these things interlink to make it sustainable. You can also look at these things. From a company perspective. Okay, so as a company, what resources are you doing? If we can just go back, obviously. As a company, what resources are you using when you're producing your products? What impacts do you have on the environment? Is your business growing and innovating? Because you want to sustain your employees. What sort of agreements do you have in your company to look after employees? So with these models, we're really trying to take a very holistic approach. Yeah. The United Nations has created the Sustainable Development Goals. And I guess the reason because if you still think of those three models, those three pillars or the three Ps, they're still very abstract, right? Yeah. Whereas United Nations goes that one step further and creates these 17 goals as how you can actually achieve those three Ps. And again, all these 17 goals focus either on the environment, on the people, or on the profits and the economy as a whole, and the interlinking so that it's a robust and strong system to really be able to develop a country sustainably. All right, so this is the kind of interesting and scary part of sustainability as to why we should really worry about it. This first graph is it's really pretty, right? It's pretty, but who wants to see more red and who wants to see more blue? The answer comes in what the meaning is behind these stripes. So a climate scientist, Ed Hawkins of the UK, created the warming stripes to visualise the long-term rise in temperature that is caused by human activities, right? So remember, it's human activities. It's not rising temperatures that are natural. It's human interference. So each stripe here will show either an increase in temperature, red, or a decrease in temperature, blue. And you can see over time, this is the world that they've looked at. Over time, you can see there's definitely more red coming along. Now, this slide in particular came from Climate Central. And Climate Central, you can go on their website. They're an independent group of scientists who research and report the facts about climate change, rising waters, etc. And it's really, there's a lot of information you can have a look, and we'll see a little bit more on the next slide. But they did a study in 2021 that found the temperature today in 2021 is 1.1 degrees warmer than what it was in the baseline of 1881 to 1910. Okay, so the starting point was 1881 to 1910. What was happening? They found it was 1.1 degrees warmer, which is scary because we have a global agreement to limit that warming to 1.5 degrees, okay, above pre-industrial levels. So what happens? Let's go to the next slide. If we go beyond, first of all, if we focus those slides, those pictures on the left, this is things that are happening today. We're having droughts throughout the region. We're having floods throughout the region. Just in January, a ski resort in India, Kashmir, had no snow. It had the lowest amount of rainfall in the last 7 years. So this is happening today. Forget about waiting to 2050 or 2030. It's happening now. The pictures on the right show you Climate Central, the website I was talking about. And here it's showing you an image of what is the Temple of Literature in Hanoi, Vietnam, going to look like if global warming does get to 3 degrees. And you can see the flooding in the area. The photo below is showing what the Temple of Literature is going to look like if we maintain at that 1.5 degrees global warming. There won't be flooding. The environment is enough to handle 1.5 degrees, but it's not possible to handle more. What about the animals? Well, have a look at the pictures on the left. Turtles eating plastic bags. How many of you, I can see you're drinking coffee from Starbucks, which is wonderful. When you bought your coffee cup, did they put it in a plastic bag for you or not? I hope not, right? No. Because single-use plastic bags are banned in many countries. And the reason why is that picture, that one on the far left, of the turtle eating the plastic bag. It thinks it's a jellyfish. He thinks he's eating food. Plastic is not food. The other issue that we have is all this pollution is going into the land and going into the water, and our animals are getting caught up and tangled and dying from it. Interestingly, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, it's a world-renowned organisation, in 2014 found that there's going to be about 850 million tonnes of ocean plastic. Okay, so 850 versus the total fish stocks of 812. So there's going to be more more plastic in the sea than fish. 2016, the World Economic Forum looked at these figures again, and they also made the claim, if we continue to dump plastic as we do today, there's going to be more plastic in the sea than fish by 2050. We can't recycle plastic. We don't do a good job of it. This is a problem that has been studied by Ellen MacArthur Foundation as well. So we really need to make wise choices in terms of what we're using in our day-to-day lives. So when we look at the plastic polluters of the world, sadly, the top 5 are coming from Asia. I'm really sorry. Number 1 is Philippines. No, bad Philippines. That's no good. We really need to make big changes. Thailand comes in at number 10, which is, not so bad, and Vietnam is number 8. But if we focus on the graph on the right, we start looking at how the plastic waste is being managed. And when you think of the section in brown, that's plastic that is mismanaged. It's not going to recycling. The grey is it's going to landfill. Now, I don't know about you, but do you want plastic going to landfill? So in 2019, about 70% of the plastic was detrimental to the environment, plastic waste, okay? So given these effects on animals and on the environment, we really need to look at what's happening with plastic. This is the slide from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and they really examined what was happening to plastic because there's a lot of it, about 78 million tonnes, okay? So of that plastic, let's say that's 100%. 32% is actually leaked, going into the ocean or going into land, right? 14% actually does get incinerated. We have 40% going to landfill, which is no good as well. And we have 14% is actually collected for recycling. Well, okay, at least it's 14, but hold on, we have a problem because we also lose 4% in the process, right, of recycling. And so there's a very small amount, 2%, that actually gets recycled, okay, which is too small. I'm very happy to say paper gets recycled about 5 times. And when you recycle paper, we've done research by the University of Western Michigan. When we've researched how much fibre is collected when you put it through the recycling process, 92.2% of that fibre is recovered. So that's good because we then use it again and again and again and again. So that's good. We're not depleting the resources when we don't have to by recycling. So here's an example. Now, the background there, let me tell you, this is not snow. This is plastic waste. It creates a mountain for this small little province in Samut Prakan, Thailand. Very, very bad. Found on Facebook, but you can imagine it makes my stomach when I look at that. Imagine living there, yeah? And imagine when it rains or when it's windy, some of that is also going into rivers, oceans, whatever. So it's a problem. Okay. We have a very precious planet, and this cartoon really highlights how we have to manage our resources from the planet. We've got to protect those non-renewable resources because they will finish. Once we've used up a non-renewable resource, it's gone and gone forever. We can't recreate it. COP, by the way, is the Conference of the Parties, where nations come together on a yearly basis to put actions in place to meet the agreements from the Kyoto Protocol to address climate change, okay? And it's happened every year. This one was this was 22 years after the first one, so it's COP22. Last year was COP28. And what they did last year is they funded how they were going to actually help the environment. So they created a bank to help areas that don't have the money to take action. We'll see how it proceeds further on. But Remember what our definition of sustainability is. And I say absolute sustainability. Look at everything, not just one particular thing. Don't just focus on renewable versus non-renewable. Focus on land, water, environment, climate change, air. Focus on all these elements so that it's there for the next generation. Okay, so these are two models, and the first is the traditional linear model. And as you can see, it's a step-by-step process where you grab the resources, you use them in production, you distribute, you consume, and then you dispose as waste. Well, guess what? That means there's resources being lost. Today, and the Ellen MacArthur, they really promote the circular economy, the circular model. And this is where we're looking to really reuse. So the first action that needs to take place is refusing to use resources, especially non-renewable resources, when there are renewable ones available. Then we reform, we create the products, and we try and reduce as much as possible our impact in the manufacturing process. We then try and reuse it to find a second use, and then either it goes to waste or we can recycle. And the concept is to try and make it turn many times, not just once. Okay? Some examples of this. So I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. In Australia, everyone's phones, you update your phones on a regular basis, and what happens to the old one, right? Do you just throw it away and it goes to landfill? E-waste. So certain councils have come up with an idea where they say, look, we don't want it to go to waste. Give us your phone, we'll wipe it clean of everything, and we're going to give it to people who are suffering in areas that don't have access to phones. So, for example, women who suffer from domestic violence, okay, they sometimes want to leave their partners, and the way they do that, they can't keep their phones, so they need new phones. They can't afford new phones. Organisations step in and give them, reuse the old phone. What a beautiful concept. It's actually giving me shivers, to tell you the truth. It's so nice because these are people in need. But there are many different examples of how we can reuse or recycle. Paperboard packaging gets recycled again and again and again. If we, do this as many times as possible, we reduce the amount that we have to take from the environment. So this circular model is very important, and the idea is to try and recycle or reuse at the highest level possible so that you go down and it gets recycled many times before it ends up in waste. Okay. So brand owners have a choice when they think about sustainable packaging. They can choose what type of packaging they're going to use, and what raw materials. Is it renewable? Is it recyclable? When the packaging is being developed, they can work with the manufacturer to ensure that it is being designed in a sustainable manner, i.e., how much does the package weigh? How much material is being used? There are tools. Is it being recovered? I went to a conference in the Philippines, and remember that plastic waste? The biggest contributor of ocean plastic waste was the Philippines. Coca-Cola said, we want to do something about this. And they created a joint venture with a local company to collect all the PET bottles. Because those PET bottles, these PET bottles are very distinct. You see that shape anywhere and you know, even if it had no label, you know it's Coca-Cola. So as a consumer, if I see a Coca-Cola bottle, the shape on the ground, in the water, I'm not a happy girl. Yeah. So a brand owner can really make choices of what they do. And Coca-Cola Philippines set up this venture where they helped collect these bottles. And they encourage consumers to deposit these bottles in these little containers. And then the joint venture came and collected and recycled those products. They did that off their own initiative. There was no government saying, you must change. And I think that's beautiful because they're making this change because it's the right thing to do, okay, for the environment, for the people, for the planet. Okay. There are many tools that exist today to help us measure the impact. But before I talk about that, I just wanted to touch on this greenwashing, very important. Volkswagen in 2015 in the US was found to be cheating in their emissions, and they were actually fined $34.69 billion US dollars, okay, because they were greenwashing. And there are many companies. You either get bad publicity or you get fines if the government imposes on them. But greenwashing, what is it? It's really just making claims about the environmental, social, or governance qualities of a product with the intent to mislead. And this cartoon is very, shows it very easily, right? So here you have a chimney stack producing a lot of pollution, and greenwashing is painting the chimney stack green so that people think, this must be good. You know, it's good for the green is the planet. It's the color of trees and the planet. So they think it's good. That is greenwashing. It's about concealing or making false claims. Or the other one is about not having data, scientific proof to back your claims. So I spoke earlier about paperboard and how when we recycle our paperboard, 92.2% of the fibre is recovered. It's not a number we just put out there. We actually independently had that quantified by the University of Western Michigan, and they followed a particular process for recyclability. That's where we get that number. So at any stage, if anyone wants to qualify or check your numbers, you can present the data. Okay, that's very important to have. The other thing is to ensure that you're not using intentionally vague or misleading language. Okay, very important. So to escape greenwashing, my recommendation is companies should really move towards this fact-based or science-based targets initiative, because the Science-Based Targets Initiative was a group of scientists that did the calculations of their CO2 emissions. Okay, so how do we measure sustainability? Who here has heard of the term life cycle assessment, LCA? Yeah, I can see some nodding. Good. Any thumbs up in the audience? Not saying anything there. I'm sure you have, but if you haven't, let me tell you what it is. An LCA just measures the environmental impact of a product as it moves through its life, right? So raw materials coming from the environment, what's happening during the manufacturing process, distribution, is it traveling long distances? Consumer, what is the consumer doing with the product? And it's then being transported for disposal. Is it being recycled? Is it going to landfill? Is it being reused? And LCA will try and capture this information so that we can make better decisions in terms of sustainability and the environment. Because when you know what the impact is, and it's been quantified, remember, then you can make decisions to improve or limit the impact on the environment. Is it okay? Okay. So when you calculate an LCA, you will get figures to support any claims you are making, and it can be used to track and improve your performance. Because greenwashing is also saying things like, I have a target to achieve net zero by 2030, and not taking any actions to do that, not having any data verified. That's greenwashing. So we need to be sure that when you have these big, bold goals, which is wonderful, to have specific actions and look at these areas to reduce your impact. So that's interesting. So the key global warming, remember it was human impact. And the slide hasn't changed for our audio. Now it's okay. It's okay, the internet. Okay, so Edward Hawkins was really focused on that human element, okay, and the emissions or rising temperatures from that. So when we look at CO2 emissions, it's divided into 3 areas, and we have scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. The easiest way to think about this, I like to think of it as scope 1 is emissions that I produce from things that I own. So if I own a factory and I'm producing emissions, that's captured in scope 1. If I own trucks and it's traveling all over the country, all the emissions from those trucks is scope 1. Scope 2 is very easy, actually. Scope 2 is emissions from electricity purchase. That's not renewable, right? So if I am just buying electricity and it's not coming from solar and it's not coming from wind energy, wind company, then it's going to fall into our scope 2 emissions, okay? Lastly, scope 3. So it's scope 1 is produce, scope 2 is buy, and scope 3 is source. You source it through your value chain, okay? And that is upstream and downstream. So through your supply chain, everything that's going in and any emissions that are involved in that get captured under scope 3. Any distribution is captured, that if you don't own it, is captured under scope 3. Okay, that's I think pretty clear. All right. So let's have a look at net zero targets. And by the way, we will go to an example of scope 1, scope 2. Let's have a look at now at net zero targets, because the fact of the matter is there are many countries out there, and about 1/5 of the world's largest companies have goals to halve their emissions by 2030, which is good, and then get to net zero So how do you get to net zero? What is net zero? Does it mean I produce nothing? Let's have a look. Okay. So net zero is really it's a balancing act. It's about making sure that when I've done my calculations and I've worked out how many emissions I produce, scope 1, scope 2, or scope 3, how many I produce, how am I going to balance that by creating emissions that are removed from the system? And you can do this through a variety of ways, like planting trees, or you could invest in renewable energy, or you can use efficient technology. Technology, in our own situation, printing presses are improving so much that the amount that you get through is faster, so you use up less or put out less CO2 emissions. So investing in your equipment is a way to offset the emissions and create this balance. So when you reach net zero, it means you're carbon neutral. And let's have a look at this in action. Okay, Thai Bev. And I'm glad you guys don't like shrink film, but Thai Bev currently produce a 1x2 cluster pack for a glass bottle, 650 ml. These figures, by the way, are just made up, okay? They're not actual data. I haven't done any LCA, so don't quote me on this, but I just wanted you to get an understanding of this net zero. So, scope 1. Who remembers what scope 1 is?
The emission from what we own or produce.
Correct. So let's assume for this example, scope 1 emissions are 10 kilos of CO2 emissions. Who remembers scope 2? The easy one.
Electricity.
Purchase electricity. And this electricity that you're using here, it's not coming from solar, it's not coming from wind generation, it's just straight power from the power fields, coal mines, etc. Then we have scope 3. Scope 3, we look at the supply chain. So some of the suppliers would be WestRock packaging, and WestRock has, when we produce a cluster pack, 1x2 for Thai Bev, it produces, let's say, 30 kilos of CO2 emissions. The glass bottle might produce 10 kilos. And lastly, transport might be another 10 kilos. So scope 3 is the total of those suppliers. Okay, so scope 3 is 50. Okay, now if WestRock wants to reduce emissions and we achieve this by 10%, that means the Thai Bev total is 77 because it's 10% of the 30, which is 3 kilos, and that's offsetting your initial total of 80 kilos of CO2 emissions. So what can you do with the remaining 77 kilos? Well, you can go and buy areas and plant lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of trees, or you could invest in new technology to improve your processes, okay, to improve your throughput, or you can put solar panels on your thing. What else can you do? That's, investing in technology or regenerative, green regenerative investments is the way to go. The very last way you could get to remove or balance the 77 is by buying reputable carbon credits. So I say reputable because there are a lot of companies make sure that it's scientifically qualified. And it's only in countries where the government has set up a carbon credit system, so it's not always available. But remember what we talked about greenwashing. Greenwashing is about not just about having a goal, It's about taking action, okay? So you don't have to get to net zero day one. You can start taking lots of actions to reduce scope 1, scope 2, and even scope 3, and make sure you choose suppliers that have goals to reduce their emissions, because that will help you reduce your own emissions. Scope 1, for example, is what you produce, so investing in your equipment, you can reduce your emissions there. Scope 2, what can you do? Well, I tell you, I've been in Thailand for about a week and a half, and I am very happy to say this is one of the first areas or offices I've been in, and areas, supermarkets, coffee shops, where air conditioning is not so cold that I'm freezing. Seriously, I'm not joking. I'm serious. Like, if you go into an office and people are having to wear jumpers, right? And it's summertime, that means your air conditioning is too cold. Put up the temperature a little bit. No one should be wearing jumpers in summertime, okay? That has two effects. A, you're going to save electricity, which is brilliant, but even more important, you're going to save CO2 emissions and help you reduce your CO2 emissions. So, and the same applies to the reverse, right? With heating. Okay, make sure it's at a reasonable temperature. If you're inside a location and it's winter time, and I know you don't really have winter here, but if it's winter time, people should not be having to take off clothes, right? They're going outside, they need maybe a light cardigan or something. They shouldn't have to come into the office and strip off because the heating is so high. Little examples of how you can make a difference. Okay, so achieving net zero, we go to the next slide. This little graph really kind of summarises it, okay? So start your journey, quantify how many CO2 emissions you're producing, and you're using when you produce your product, okay? And you could do that using an LCA tool, or there are other tools, other companies that can do this for you, but make sure it's based on scientific. The scientific is a global international standard of measuring CO2 emissions, okay? So it means it's all consistent. You don't want to do a measurement and then have someone challenge you in the way it's being measured, like Volkswagen, okay? Because that's what happened to Volkswagen. It's the way their emissions were being measured that was the problem. Next, we look at, set some targets, have some goals, wonderful, and then take actions and work out how you can reduce. So it's wonderful that that you've invited your suppliers, ourselves, to really learn about sustainability and our emissions, so that everyone can take action, because we know that the government here hasn't put laws down and fines down in terms of pollution. So improve your production process to reduce scope 1, use green energy wherever possible to reduce scope 2. Look at the raw materials that we're using. Is it renewable? Is it not renewable? How much material is being used? Can you reduce it? Can you lightweight it? Then offset any CO2 emissions by planting trees or investing in companies. There is a way of investing in purchase power agreements, PPA. And if you invest in renewable, PPA, that's a way that could be an offset for your own emissions, correct? And there are cohorts out there. Say if Thai doesn't have the finance to invest by themselves, there are groups that will organise all the different players that want to invest in renewable programs such as solar farms or wind farms, okay, purchase power agreements, so that you can get a credit to offset your own CO2 emissions. Okay. And here's just a nice little picture of using reputable, and I keep that, make sure it's reputable, growing the trees, innovative technology, regenerative agriculture. Tongue twister of a word. I struggle with it. I think it's the first time I've said it correctly. Okay. So let's talk about WestRock a little bit now. And I'm very pleased to say that WestRock has a LCA tool that provides data-driven information on packaging so that people, our customers, can make informed decisions on how to lessen the impact on the environment. So we look at things like, waste. Is it going to landfill? We look at things like the greenhouse gas emissions. That's the net greenhouse gas emissions. And I've got a slide to really explain the difference between this net greenhouse gas and the fossil fuel gas emissions, because there's a little bit of a difference. Then we look at water consumption and how much electricity we're using. So all these elements come to create a full picture of sustainability from WestRock. And we do this because we know it's very important to the consumer. Around the world, it's important to the consumer, where 82% of consumers want packaging, sustainable packaging, that is safe and sustainable. Okay, so it's that balance between safety and impact. They want it to protect the product. They don't want the glass bottle to fall and break. That's no good. But they also don't want you to do it in a manner that maybe uses non-renewable resources or can't be recycled. So they really focus on these areas: the plastic pollution in the ocean, packaging waste, areas that are a big concern to consumers around the world. But we know it's important to us because it's actually also important to our brand owners like ThaiBev and other brand owners. They have their own corporate sustainability goals. And so we believe that by addressing we have our own goals as well, and by addressing our own goals and working together with our brand owners, we can really create a strong partnership for that goal of sustainability. So we're committed to transparency, and our LCAs are one tool that we share, and we on an annual basis produce a sustainability report. Our 2023 sustainability report is about to be published in April. So that'll be available on our website, and it will give you very detailed information as to how we've progressed. Okay, so, and I'm sure you have your own sustainability report. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. Yeah. Yes, it's already available. Oh, you're better than us. Hey. But we're getting there. We all try very hard to achieve these goals. Okay, now I just want to say this. Okay, not all CO2 emissions are the same. Okay, and by that I mean, if we look at the picture on the right there, the fossil fuel emissions that come from fossil fuel, that's non-biogenic, and it goes straight into the atmosphere. Okay, it's a one-way street. Okay. However, if you look at the picture on the left, when you use a product that uses raw materials from like trees, for example, trees have a beautiful component where they actually absorb CO2 emissions from the atmosphere, as well as put some out into the atmosphere. So it's a natural regenerative process that trees have. Okay, so they absorb and put down as they break down. Okay, and the beautiful thing is that packaging is from trees, from fibre, and most of the CO2 emissions associated with our packaging is biogenic. And so there is actually a positive from using paperboard that comes from virgin fibre, because it's the tree, right? It's not recycled. We need recycling, agreed, but it's also the virgin fibre, because every time you use virgin fibre, there's a tree that's starting the process that's capturing those CO2 emissions. Okay. Now, our LCA tool at the moment currently excludes the biogenic carbon, but I'm very happy. And the reason being is because we're publishing the next version of the tool that will include it. But when we include it, it's going to be scientifically based. So we're getting outside third parties to measure and quantify correctly how much carbon exactly is being absorbed by those trees. We don't want greenwashing. Okay. Okay, so our tool at the moment was developed by the Sustainable Solutions Corporation and is consistent with a lot of ISO practices and standards. It's independently reviewed by industrial ecology consultants. And when we do our numbers, right, for our paperboard, we're using actual data. So how much electricity we're using in the whole system of WestRock. So how much electricity our mills are using, how much water is being used by our mills, if it's being transported here to Thailand or Vietnam or Korea, wherever it's going, how many emissions is that calculated? We calculate how many emissions from that transport. And we calculate this overall number according to the World Resources Institute for Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is the global standard in reporting. And that's why I say if you use external parties to calculate LCAs, make sure they're using this global standard, the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, very important. The other thing that we do to make sure that there's no greenhouse gassing, sorry, is we have had Ernst & Young, the company, evaluate our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, so the ones that we produce and the ones that we buy. And as I said, we're looking at Scope 3 as well. So all emissions and the last point is it's from our perspective, okay? So when we don't have access to, say, corrugate, well, actually we have internal corrugate, but there are other corrugate suppliers and we don't have access to their data. We have only our data to use, okay? Very, very important. So now forget about these numbers, okay, because I just really wanted to focus on this, the benefit of using virgin fibre versus shrink or recycled fibres, because what happens, and you can see the green bar on the right is using a pack of one of our packs, but because our packaging is made from about 90% virgin fibre, then all the trees that would be associated with the production of that packaging would be absorbing, and that's the carbon uptake bar that you see there. Also, we produce, as trees get broken and as trees disintegrate and degrade, I've got a tongue twister here. Okay, so break down. As trees break down or as packaging breaks down, it emits biogenic carbon into the atmosphere, and that's the yellow that you're seeing there. But the net effect, look how small it is versus other materials that don't have that positive uptake. And I was going to tell you, it's called carbon sequestration. That's what it is. So it's a fancy term, but it just means the uptake, the collection of the carbon from the atmosphere. So that's coming soon. It might not look exactly like that, but that's the idea behind it, okay? Next slide. So when we think of absolute sustainability, we're trying to focus on lots of different areas, not just one area, okay? We're looking at our CO2 emissions, we're looking at energy, we're looking at water, we're looking at landfill. And these graphs, our tool allows you to really compare one product versus another so that you can make an informed decision. Okay, so things like you take into consideration the product weight, the type of material, how it's being processed and manufactured, how the converting is happening. Okay, and is there recycled fibre or not? And how is it being disposed of at the end of its life? All these things need to take into consideration so that you can look and go, you know what, for me, Thai Bev, you know, the most important thing that I'm looking at all those, but the most important area might be the CO2 emissions. Then you would look at example 1, right? It has the best CO2. But in comparison with water and landfill, sample 1 doesn't have as much of a decrease. So we really need to look at the holistic picture. So the beauty of, and I'm proud to be part of WestRock because, you know, we really stand by sustainability. We use fibre to produce our paperboard. We have a lot of goals under our people, planet and innovation, and to drive our business and do it in a sustainable manner, or do it as sustainably as possible. So we're going to have a look at a little bit of innovation that we're working on. But today we've got a 5.6% reduction. And remember, this is a science-based target initiative in our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. And we've got a target of reducing this by 27.5% by 2030. And we're on track. That number will deliver that if we continue this year on year. 100% of our fibre is sourced from certified forests, and that means it's sustainably sourced, okay? We're not causing deforestation. Let's have a look at, so if you want to reduce Scope 3 emissions, I guess think about, you know, has the supplier, does your supplier, like WestRock, have goals and targets to reduce emissions? Then partner with us. So let's talk about this fibre certification a little bit. What is it and why? And, you know, many, many years ago, you can see this is an old picture, but many years ago when paper manufacturers were doing business and creating packaging, etc., or making furniture, or what was happening was this picture on the left, deforestation. The issue was more, not only was it deforestation, but it was happening in a rainforest. So areas as large as Belgium or Nicaragua were being lost every year. Okay.
Can I add something? Is it compares like an eastern part of Thailand? We put like a Chonburi, Prajinburi, Janthaburi, Rayong. It's like an eastern part of Thailand. What cut down tree every year.
And because in these areas, 25% of the world's mammals and 11% of the world's bird species were being threatened. Okay, once there were plants and types of plants and animals that were disappearing because of this deforestation of our rainforests. And it really showed that the legal mechanisms were not working. So what happened? there were NGOs that said, you know what, this is really bad. This is no good. So companies like Greenpeace or Forest Ethics really started putting some direct attacks on brand owners. And this is old, this is not present day. I'm just showing you back then. They started attacking brand owners because they were causing deforestation, and they wanted to communicate this to the consumer so the consumer would make an informed decision and stop buying those products. So, for example, Mattel with Barbie. Barbie, it's over. I don't date girls that are into deforestation. Okay. Or Head and Shoulders wipes out dandruff and rainforests. Well, you know, if I was a consumer back then and I had a problem with dandruff, I wouldn't still be buying, you know, Head and Shoulders. I'd try and find another brand that was not creating this rainforest deforestation. So what did brand owners do? Because they didn't want to have this negative publicity. The way to fight or combat this negative publicity is through fibre certification, forestry certification programs. So forestry certification, these are voluntary programs where you are audited by independent auditors on an annual basis to make sure that when you're producing your product, it's being produced in a manner that is not endangering any tree species or any communities or any animal species. And you can, it's being sourced so it's not creating deforestation. FSC and PEFC these are international standards, globally recognised, and they're very similar to each other. Think of cola, okay? This brand is Coca-Cola, another brand is Pepsi. They both produce cola as a drink. FSC and PEFC is the same. Both are focused on creating sustainably managed ensuring the forests are sustainably managed, and they're creating an ability for you as a brand owner to communicate with the consumer that the packaging that comes from this is sustainably managed. The other three are the Sustainable Forest Initiative, SFI, that is a North American standard. The next one is the Small Tree Farmers Association, another North American standard. And then the Clarifor is from Brazil, okay? But WestRock paperboard, all of it is FSC and or PEFC certified. And so that gives you an element of assurance that we're not causing deforestation. So when we look at these forestry programs, we're ensuring we're checking the validity of where the fibre is actually coming from. We're also looking to ensure that, you know, whoever's working through the system is not using things like child labour or modern slavery. Okay, do you understand modern slavery? Modern slavery, so not, you know, very little child labour happens today, but modern slavery is things like, say if I employed you, you're an immigrant, and I employed you to work for me, and I took your passport away from you, that's an example of modern slavery, because I tell you you have to do anything I tell you, and you can't leave because I've got your passport, right? Modern slavery, to ensure that modern slavery doesn't happen, you ensure that your employees have access and they can actually talk and raise concerns that they have on how they're being treated. If you have a compliance line or an address, an email address where employees can, raise concerns that they have, disputes, and they're not punished for raising that, then there's no modern slavery that's happening. Okay, it's just a fair way of looking after your employees. But we also look at the fibre, where it's coming from. And the last aspect is this local communities, because we don't want to impact the area where local communities or Indigenous people survive because of the rainforest or because of those tree plantations. So sustainable procurement or these forestry programs look after all these aspects. So here's these beautiful logos that you can see around on different packaging. I've seen it on tables where they've used certified forests to make the tables, the wood itself. You can use it in lots of different elements. The main difference between FSC and PEFC, okay, is PEFC recognises other forestry programs. So it recognises SFI, the Sustainable Forestry Initiative of North America, and it also recognises the Small Tree Farmers Association, the ATFC-FS. Okay, so in terms of how much the pool of PEFC, the Program for the Endorsement of Forest Certification Scheme, how much is available? There's a lot, because it's recognising other bodies. FSC, or the Forest Stewardship Council, they only recognise FSC certified forests, okay? So there's less of it. But they have a great marketing arm and they really promote FSC. So a lot of NGOs naturally like FSC because of that marketing. But I am seeing PEFC rising up, and a lot more products are actually carrying these logos more and more. And I do have an example. Oh, no, I'll show you an example in the next. But if you want to produce certified packaging, you need to ensure that everyone who owns the material is certified. So the material itself is certified. If the mill buys those fibres, they have to be certified. If the WestRock converts and sells packaging, we have to be certified to allow you to then put one of these logos on the packaging. So certified products are traced through the production process from the forest to consumers, including all stages of processing, transformation, manufacturing, and distribution. That's called the chain of custody. And it's one of the reasons why I'm here today, actually, and not here specifically, but in Thailand. WestRock Thailand is FSC certified. And because of this interest in PEFC, we're currently going through PEFC certification. So we're getting independently audited for PEFC to make sure we've got a system in place to track and trace that material all the way from the production of the packaging all the way through to the resource itself. And we expect to have that by the end of April, ready for you to use. So here's just two examples. One's from Japan for FSC, and the other is actually from Australia for PEFC. But it's there to show you how you can put these logos on your packaging, because paper does come from trees, but you can have these certifications on your packaging to tell the consumer that it's sustainably sourced. All right.
What's in terms of the requirement between FSC and PEFC? What are the distinction where we can get this kind of certification?
Okay, so from your perspective, there's not too much distinction. It is really dependent on the material that is sourced. Okay, so for WestRock, we source, our board can be PEFC certified and also carries, and we also can request FSC. The default board for WestRock Thailand is PEFC Chain of Custody certified. Okay, in terms of the difference, so apart from the program recognising other programs, so FSC recognises, it doesn't recognise any other program, but PEFC does. The other point of difference is the way we manage the material in the process. PEFC uses a separation, a physical separation, whereas FSC uses a transfer system to control the material. Transfer just means that if the incoming, if we go to the next slide, if the incoming, the source of the material or the mill, if the material on it says, and this is FSC, if the material says FSC mix credit and we're using the transfer system, when we produce packaging for Thai Bev, if it was going to have FSC, all our documentation has to have FSC mix credit on the documentation. We're transferring the claim from one to the next. Whereas PEFC is just using physical separation in the production process. So if you go to a converting facility, you'll be able to see all this material here is either in a little area and it has PEFC. There might be another area that says FSC, and there might be another area that says non-certified or none, okay? Or there could be very clear labels because you can get that physical separation. PEFC might have a green label, FSC might have a blue label, and non-certified a white label. It's just something that we would use and ensure that material is not getting mixed. That's all they want to do. Okay, let's talk about the circular economy. Okay, so this, we really focus on our three pillars of, people and the communities, and that's where we have goals around safety. That's where we have goals around diversity, equality, inclusion, belonging. We want to make sure we have a robust and diverse workforce that's representative of the local market. We have goals around the planet, CO2 emissions, improved water usage, sustainably managed forests or fibres. And then we also have goals around innovating for our customers, really creating innovations that are going to drive sustainability. So that makes business sense for us, and it makes business sense for our brand owners who have sustainable packaging goals. So when we think of this circular economy, we ensure that the materials we source are sustainably sourced from certified forests, no deforestation. We have design experts that are going to create packaging that reduces as much as possible how much material you are using, okay? And then where our factories are being used, where in our mills, for example, about 60% of the power that is used in our paper making mills comes from all the little barks and clipping from the trees that can't be used because the fibres are no good, that can't be used in the paper making process. So we burn that and it powers our paper making machines. We still have to buy some electricity. It's not enough. We still have to buy some, but a lot of it comes from our own internal waste that we use. So that's how that regenerative process is working there. But then also our packaging, our paperboard is recyclable. Okay? And consumers, the fact is, consumers look at paperboard and they don't have to think what to do with it, right? I went to the bathroom before, toilet, and saw the beautiful garbage bins that you have separating everything, right? Separating your waste, your recycling, and you had little containers or little buckets to capture the lids and things like that, which is fantastic. You don't need, for paper and paper recycling, you actually don't need any sign to say recycled paper, because consumers always make the assumption that you can recycle paper, and you can. So that's the beautiful thing at WestRock, that we use a material that is recyclable. Then be confident that we have a tool that captures and measures our impact on the environment in a scientific manner that can be validated. Okay. And lastly, we really try to innovate to reduce those LCAs. So WestRock does support a circular economy, and this is a project. Let me stop. No, this is fine. Yeah. And this is a project called Canopy, and we're very excited about this project. It's something new that's being developed at WestRock, and what it's being developed for is often in the distribution channel, you use a corrugate tray and plastic shrink film for distribution, not for sale, right? For just distribution. Well, that plastic shrink film is not recyclable, right? I know it's very light, but still it's not recyclable. It's going to stay in the environment for so long that we thought, can we replace this shrink film with a paper version? Something that can still hold your product together for your distribution, but it is recyclable. And that's where this fibre shield paper comes in. So this material can be recyclable, and we are developing machines that can literally go on your existing lines to take out that shrink film, put in a reel of paper and glue it to your corrugate. We have to do work. You have to make sure that the corrugate is strong, okay, because paper, is strong, but it's not the same as shrink film, okay? So we do work to make sure the corrugate is strong, the paper is wrapped tightly around it, and then it can be used through the distribution process. So when we look at the performance of this material, from an LCA perspective versus shrink film, and let's we have done, and the LCAs that we've done are older. So again, because we're using actual data, each year you have to update your LCAs for the last year's energy usage, etc. This is at the moment from last year. So we have our material is strong enough, and it is actually, when you include the biogenic carbon, when you compare to shrink film, it has a favourable outcome by 45%. If you exclude biogenic, that carbon uptake, tray and shrink has a favourable outcome. So this is where we come to what is your, should you include the favourable or should you not include it? That's a decision for you. But personally, my decision, WestRock, we think you should include it because if you're taking carbon from the atmosphere, it's a good thing to include. It's also preferred it has a favourable water consumption, 61% versus shrink film, and solid waste to landfill is 43%. Lastly, when you look at consumers and how they feel about paper versus plastic, it is the material of choice. Consumers like seeing paper on the shelves versus plastic. Here is some more innovation. We talked about, by the way, just in terms of the canopy, we have machines, new mid-speed machines that will be available as of June of this year, ready so that you can replace your existing lines with a canopy version. Just putting it out there. Okay, so here's some new designs, some designs that we have in our portfolio, and you as a brand owner can start looking at how much material is being used. If you want to reduce your CO2 emissions and you're looking at, say, a cluster pack, you could potentially start looking at a prem collar or something else to reduce your emissions. But then you might say, well, yes, but I need my cluster pack because of the branding and the amount of information I can put on it. We offer you the alternatives, and it's depending on what your particular goals as to what you choose. But at least with this, you have the ability to make those choices. In terms of large PET, same thing. If you're multi-packing large PET, these packs, the PET Collar Shield Plus, are very strong. And you have to be very strong to pick them up. I'm telling you, because when they're 2 litres and it's a 4 by 2 litre, you get muscles picking up. But there might be a need from a distribution perspective, right? Distribution perspective, if you want to get rid of shrink film, you could use this, a Prem Collar Shield Plus, to replace and get rid of the shrink film if canopy is not your answer, okay? These are alternatives for you to think about as you pursue your sustainable goals. So this is what I just want to leave you with this thought. At WestRock, we say we want to innovate boldly and package sustainably. Renewable material that's recyclable, beautiful. That looking after the planet, people and communities, beautiful. You can place trust in our packaging because it protects the products. We want to think differently. If there's a particular need that you are looking for that we don't have, let us know. Let us work together and solve the issue and come up with a sustainable packaging solution for you. So, at the very end, I guess my last thought on this. So, yeah. So at the end of the day, if we think about Asia, there are not many laws or legislation, unlike Europe, right, that force us to make these changes. But like the Philippines, Coca-Cola, they're making changes because it's the right thing to do. And it's beautiful to see Thai Bev taking actions like your recycling here in the office because it's the right thing to do. And when you're making choices, think about WestRock and our paperboard solutions that are sustainably sourced, recyclable, renewable. You're not depleting resources that will never come back. We plant trees, okay? We're not creating deforestation. So there's a lot of positives using WestRock. And the team here in Thailand and also the team in, Vietnam, will work with you to help you achieve your goals, whatever they are. Okay? So I don't know if anyone has any questions. Con, has anyone?
ครับก็ในส่วนของหัวข้อการสัมมนาคุณอเล็กก็กล่าวจบไปแล้วนะครับแล้วก็ได้นำเสนอจบนะครับส่วนท่านใดที่มีคำถามในหัวข้อต่างๆหรือว่ามีความสงสัยนะครับไม่แน่ใจว่าทุกท่านได้ยินผมพูดไปขอโทษด้วยนะครับก็โทษทีครับถ้าท่านใดมีคำถามหรือมีความสงสัยหรือว่าไม่เข้าใจตรงไหนก็สามารถสอบถามได้เลยนะครับพิมพ์มาก็ได้หรือว่าจะให้เปิดไมค์ถามก็ได้นะครับ if everyone have any question do not hesitate to raise your hand up or just let us know or you open the microphone and speak to us
Questions, and if there are any gaps any problems in this area that you're looking for solutions, send us an email, raise your hands here, because we really want to partner together and create those solutions for you.
ครับผมก็คุณเล็กเขาบอกว่าถ้าเกิดมีข้อสงสัยหรืออะไรต้องการสอบถามเพิ่มเติมจริงๆสามารถส่งอีเมลสอบถามเราได้เลยนะครับไม่ต้องห่วงครับก็สามารถสอบถามได้เลย
Oh, thank you. I do that, but thank you. I just read I'm glad it's been informative. Have you learned anything, or did you know what I covered already?
มีได้เรียนมีความเข้าใจขนาดไหนหรือว่ายังไงนะครับหรือว่าไม่มีความหรือว่ายังตกหล่นตรงไหนบ้างก็สอบถามได้เลยนะครับไม่ต้องกังวลครับทางคุณอเล็กซ์รอที่จะตอบคำถามทุกท่านอยู่นะครับมีไหมเอ่ย
Anything is nicely done, like for other people. I can say anything to them is something that sounds scientific and difficult to understand, but you have a way of explaining it simply. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That was the aim, right?
Yes.
To really explain sustainability as much as possible to the whole audience.
Yes.
Okay. So they have some question is during the transition from the packaging from is to be 100% of the recycle is too difficult.
So yeah, that's a really good question. You know, depending on what your goals are, depends on how much recycled content you want to include in your material. And what happens if you try increase your recycled content to 100%, the strength of the board is very weak. You would not be able to carry glass bottles in humid and wet environments. It would fall apart and glass would fall out. So we never recommend to increase recycled content. We have got a project at the moment to increase recycled content, and we find that if we increase recycled content to 25%, the strength of the pack goes down, but it's manageable. So that's one thing. So that's good. Recycled content, circular economy. However, there's a problem with this. Remember how I told you how our paper making machines use all the bark and the little trees that we can't use in the paper making process to power the machines, right? If we're increasing our recycled content, it means there's less power, right? So our scope 2 emissions that we buy go up. So it actually goes up by 6%. If we increase our recycled content from 8% to 25%, our scope 2 emissions go up 6%. So what's the goal? Sometimes there are these trade-offs that people have to make. The other issue with 100% recycled board is, I said that paper or fibres can be recycled up to 5 times. Okay? After 5 times, the material is very weak and it just goes to waste. If we said, okay, that's it, we're going to stop using virgin fibre, we're going to be using only 100% recycled fibre, what happens is we're going to run out of fibre in the system in 13 months, approximately, right? It's a number, but about 13 months. We'll have no more paper. So you need both virgin fibre and recycled fibre in the system. Otherwise, you won't have paper anymore, paper products. Okay?
นักเรียนมีคำถามไหมครับ
มีค่ะ
ครับผม
Hi Alex, this is Anshuman speaking. In Thailand, we have a sustainability development working team. Most of the people in your room, the room that you
Thank you very well.
they work so hard to advocate all those sustainability things, the benefit of them, and how we can meet to the net zero goals. What is your suggestion for us to raise all those sustainability awareness to other people, like our friends, family, or even our business partners? Because to some of them, this might not so important to them.
Sorry, we've just got a little problem that I actually can't hear your question very well. So maybe I'll just come down to.
พูดเสียงดังกว่านี้หน่อยค่ะ
Did you hear Com or?
ขอพูดเสียงดังนิดนึงได้ไหมครับโทษทีครับ
So do I need to repeat all those things?
ครับผมพอดีในลำโพงในห้องมันมีปัญหาเสียงนิดนึงครับโทษทีครับ
Okay,ค่ะ. Yes, Alex, this is Anshuman speaking. In Thai Bell, we have a sustainability development working team. They are most of the people you are sitting next to me. Yes, they're working so hard to advocate all those sustainability things to us, the benefit of them, and how we can meet the net zero goals. But what is your suggestion to us to raise all those awareness, sustainability awareness to other people like our friends, our family, or even our business partners? Because to some of them, this might not so important to them.
So the question is how to raise awareness about your sustainability?
Yes.
Well, I mean, one of the things is if you think about social media today, and young people, millennials, really respond to social media. And if you can try and ensure that whether you're using, Twitter or hashtag, every time you take action, remember, it has to be quantified, right? It has to be verified. Make sure you use these social media platforms to publicize what you're doing, okay? Even things like LinkedIn really work well when you're taking action to promote it on LinkedIn, because everyone that follows you gets access to see those messages. That's one thing. The other thing I 100% suggest is using things like the certification logo on packaging. So PFC certification on your packaging will say, and sourced from sustainably, or packaging sourced from sustainably managed forests. Consumers, it tells the consumer what you're doing. Yeah. Does that help or not really? I'm just trying to give you ideas. I think another thing, another way to, I guess, publicize or promote the actions that you're taking is to go into schools and talk about sustainability, and you talk about, things like when you're buying drinks, are you carrying plastic bags? Yep. Perfect. You guys are doing a great job already, even organising this workshop, this session where, your suppliers are also included and have the ability to learn about sustainability and become aware of it. It's exactly what you can need to do. So it's doing a good job.
Okay, thank you.
ครับมีคำถามอย่างอื่นอีกไหมครับสามารถสอบถามได้เลยนะครับ
Yeah. Sustainability is definitely a growing topic though, because what I'm finding in globally, even in Asia, but in Europe and America, there are a lot of sustainability meetings happening, seminars, and brand owners from all different organizations are offered the ability to speak and talk about the sustainable actions that you're taking. And that's exactly where I got the Philippines Coca-Cola example, was by attending one of these sustainability summits in Singapore, it was actually, to learn about the actions that everyone are taking. So, participating in those events is also another way to really raise awareness about what Thai Bev is doing in the area.
Yes, most of people use the sustainability come with the additional cost, something like that, FSC or something, some certificate. What do you think about it?
Okay. Remember we talked about the limited amount of FSC material? So because of that limit and the amount of work that's involved in traceability and things like that, FSC does carry a premium. However, PEFC doesn't. So you have the option at the end of April to start using PEFC and promoting that the packaging is from sustainably managed forests. But sustainability does carry a cost, okay? You try and reduce that as much as possible by, using less material or lightweighting the material. You try and reduce and making sure that the throughput is as efficient as possible, right, from a packaging perspective, so packaging machine fast. But when you think of sustainability, there's going to be an element that maybe you do have to spend more to be sustainable. Okay? It's very difficult because unfortunately, shrink film or plastic is very cheap, and that's why there's so much of it. Remember the mountain that we saw? No snow, a mountain of plastic, because it's so cheap. Take a walk through the supermarket and see how much plastic there is. There's too much. And, when governments put legislation and penalties in place to penalise companies for waste, so ERP systems, then that will bring up the price of these cheap products. But again, who knows when that's going to happen? So my thought is do it, even take small steps, because it's the right thing to do, okay? And yes, it might cost a little bit more, but if you can promote it, what you're doing, and you promote it well, then it might actually increase your sales.
Yeah.
Because the consumer and the young generation is starting to really worry about or think about the environment.
And the other side of the costing, what we never seen it is the management system for the take it back to recycle, compare like the plastic or even the paper. So that means now no one take care about the cost for the management. Now it's the government, they are taking, but they actually our money as well, right? So that is I think is if the total chain is actually the money is the one thing that is but just only like who pays.
Yeah. Remember our 3 pillars. Yeah. Profit is important, 100%. But so is the planet and so are the people. Okay. And try and find a little balance between all those things. Thank you.
Any question ครับมีคำถามอะไรอีกไหมครับสอบถามได้เลยนะครับ
All right.
ครับถ้าไม่มีก็ น่าจะจบการสัมมนาเท่านี้นะครับเพื่อแล้วก็ถ้าเกิดเดี๋ยวผมจะทิ้งโน้ตไว้เป็นอีเมลของทาง WestRock กันนะครับเผื่อท่านใดมีข้อมูลหรือข้อสงสัยหรือต้องการคำอธิบายเพิ่มเติมหรือรายละเอียดเพิ่มเติมเดี๋ยวยังไงเดี๋ยวผมจะส่งอีเมลผมไว้ในช่องแชทไว้ให้นะครับแล้วก็ถ้าเกิดท่านใดสงสัยก็สามารถสอบถามได้เลยนะครับครับผม
Thank you everyone for your time today. I look forward to interacting. I look forward to seeing some big progress working together. It's gone through. Cool. Excellent. Well, we're on track there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Today we learn a lot of sustainability from you. And today, no single plastic bag from now.
Yes, say no to plastic straws. They offer you a plastic straw. No, don't need a plastic straw. Carry your own metal straw or don't use a straw at all. You know, little decisions all these little decisions can make a big impact.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.